All right, guys, so I think it's finally starting to happen. Sellers are starting to wake up and get realistic about what is happening in the UK housing market at the moment. They're starting to panic a little bit, and Rightmove is a bit of a bloodbath. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look through Rightmove at some real world examples of what is going on so that you guys can take my observations and apply them to your local market. And that's probably the best advice I can give to anyone that is thinking about buying or selling at the moment is, yes, of course, pay attention to the national house price indexes such as Nationwide, Halifax, even the Rightmove stuff, even though I'm not a huge fan of it, which I've covered in previous videos. But you also need to be watching yourself, your local market. So I try and get on Rightmove probably on a daily basis, and I've been doing so for the past year or so I can see what properties are selling, which ones are being reduced, and more importantly, which ones aren't selling, so I can get a real feel for what's happening in my local market. So you can take the national picture, combine that with your knowledge of the local market, put it together and try and form your own opinion. Now, before I go over to Rightmove, we're just going to take a quick look at some of the stats so we can see what the national picture is for Rightmove. And this is the latest report, which is showing that year on year, asking prices for new listings, always remember this is new listings only, it excludes existing listings, which I'm going to come back to on the next tab. But year on year, new listing asking prices are down negative 0.4%. We've just gone negative year on year. So you can see this is a slow waking up for sellers, because Nationwide, which is agreed sale prices, has been negative for pretty much the majority of 2023, and overall we're down over 5% year on year. So this still shows that overall sellers aren't completely accepting what is happening, but the trajectory of this line very much shows they are starting to wake up, and this is being reflected by what we're seeing on Rightmove itself. Now, in terms of the actual data that's available in the Rightmove report, I'm just going to read out some key pieces of information before we go on to Rightmove itself. The average new seller asking prices increased marginally by 0.4% month on month. So we're 0.4% down year on year, but increased 0.4 month on month, which actually is still a bad thing because this is lower than is usual for this time of year. September, we normally see quite a big bump after August being very, very quiet when everyone's on holiday. So again, that is a very negative sign for Rightmove and the housing market. As expected, the annual price change drops further to negative 0.4%, as we just covered, the biggest drop since March 2019. Now, this is the key thing. A lot of the news articles you see around the Rightmove figures only focus on the headline new listing prices, whereas actually this is the most important bit. 36.3% of properties currently for sale have had a price reduction, with an average reduction equating to over £22,000, which is over 6%. And also something that's important to note, as I'm going to come back to this as we go through the video, the first time buyer sector, 2 bedrooms or fewer, is once again the best performing sector. And we believe this is because some people are downsizing. So there's also a lot of demand from first time buyers who are finding rental prices absolutely insane at the moment. But there's also people downsizing from larger houses. They're trying to sell before they lose too much money on the larger property and buy a cheaper property. And just one final chart. This is a chart of the Rightmove number of listings available. So you can see over the past 2 years when there was lots of competition, basically the blow off top in the housing market where prices peaked, there was substantially less properties available, between 200,000 to 250,000 listings on Rightmove. And ever since things turned last year, this has been increasing sharply. And we're up over 450,000 listings. And at the moment, no signs of slowing down. So as buyers continue to disappear or hold off in the market and more sellers get desperate, this line keeps going up. So there's more supply and there is less buyers at the moment. So that paints the overall picture for the housing market at the moment. Let's put the webcam back on so you guys can see me. Now, I just want to share with you some of my own observations from what I'm seeing on Rightmove, which is an indicator that things are pretty bad for sellers at the moment. The first thing is I am seeing a big increase in portal juggling, as it's called. Now, this is something I've talked about in the past. And this is where you get the case of either a seller doesn't want to reduce their price, or the estate agent is trying to generate more interest without actually telling the seller. So if we take both examples, the seller doesn't want to drop their price, but they're moaning at the estate agent that their property isn't selling. So what the estate agent does is they drop the price by at least 2%. It has to be 2% because that is the Rightmove threshold. And if they do that, two things happen. One, the listing appears at the top of the listings when sorted by newly listed. It will appear as a reduction. And number two, it will also be sent out in their property alerts emails. So what they do is the estate agent reduces the prices, gets that email sent, gets the listing put back to the top, and then they put the price back up. So this is, I think it's fraudulent. Whether it's illegal, I'm not sure, but it's certainly misleading, and it's very important to be using a Chrome extension or something like this. So I use one called Property Log, and it tells me what has been happening. So we can very clearly see that 3 months after they listed their property, rather than facing the reality that their property is clearly overpriced or it would have sold, it always boils down to that. It doesn't matter what issue your property's got. If the price is right, it will sell. So if you haven't sold in 3 months, stop making excuses and drop your price. If you want to sell, it's very, very simple. But instead of doing that, what they did is, we just want to tell more people about our overpriced properties. So they did portal juggling. So I've seen an increase in this. Like I say, the other scenario where this happens is where the estate agent doesn't even tell the seller that they're doing it. Maybe the estate agent needs to generate some sales, and they're hoping by doing so, by getting one of their properties back to the top of their listings and in the email alerts, they might be able to generate a sale. So a large increase in portal juggling. And I know I've got Your Move here, but I'm seeing this across all of the estate agents. Well, not all of them. A lot of estate agents are at this. So I don't blame one or two in particular. If anything, I blame Rightmove for allowing this to happen, because it is absolutely rife, and they could easily fix this with probably half hour of coding if they really wanted to. So an increase in portal juggling is definitely a sign that things are not good for sellers at the moment. The next thing I'm seeing is expensive properties, or the higher end of the market. Now, the higher end of the market is going to differ in value depending on where you are in the country. So the area I've chosen here is where I used to live last year. And we can see that a lot of the more expensive properties have seen price reductions. Now, you can argue that these price reductions are pretty much pointless, taking 3% off a £1.6 million property having been listed. Well, they listed July 2022, and then in April 2023 took 50 grand off the price. You always have to remember with Rightmove, you have sellers that actually want to sell, which is probably about a third of the market, and a lot of sellers who aren't actually that fast. They aren't committed to selling. So it's very important not to read too much into the listings that are either got small reductions or don't have any reductions at all. That doesn't paint a clear picture of the market. You want to focus on the ones that are seeing larger reductions, and also the ones that are going sold subject to contract, and seeing what reductions they had and what price point they sold as well, what condition they're in, what size they're in, what price bracket they're in, etc. So always remember that when you look at these. Some people aren't actually committed to selling, and someone who's reduced their price by 50 grand in a year, in my opinion, isn't interested in selling that much. So we've got reductions there on the more expensive one. Another one here, these guys have taken off 100 grand. So this is slightly more realistic. They come in April, and then in July, 3 months later, they dropped it by £100,000. We're now getting into late September, so probably suggesting that this is still overpriced. 3 months later again, or is it 2 months later again at the moment, they might want to be considering dropping that again. At the moment, if they chase the market down, they're going to end up selling for even less eventually than if they got ahead of the price falls. These guys here look a bit more serious. They're down 250 grand or 16.7% since July. Now, I actually know this house. This is behind where I used to live. And they tried to sell this, I think, a year or two ago for just over £1 million. So I have no idea where they come on at 1.5 million, because this was never worth 1.5 in the first place. So although this reduction is quite substantial, I still think the price point is wrong at the moment. But we'll see what happens. They've only been reduced for 10 days at the new price at the moment. It's certainly an interesting one to watch. But I think what this does paint is a clear picture that the more expensive properties just aren't selling. Even with reductions, they aren't selling. So we know the higher end, and it makes sense. At the higher end, there's more likely to be more debt. People are getting bigger mortgages for more expensive properties. And, a 2% interest rate on 100,000 mortgage going to 5%, yeah, it hurts, but it's not too bad. But a 2% mortgage on, say, 800,000 going to 5%, that's going to be a massive, massive difference to the monthly payment. So you can see why the top end is going to get hollowed out a bit more than the bottom end. And also the bottom end, you've got the downsizers and the first time buyers coming in. The other thing that I'm seeing as well is that many of the properties that are actually selling, I'm tending to find that many of them are in very, very good conditions. And I think this maybe is a reflection on the fact that the costs of materials and the cost of labor has gone up so much. So no longer are people necessarily interested in renovating a property or buying an older property and just doing it up over time because it costs so much. So people seem to be happy to pay the premium to get a property that is already finished. Now, I'm not saying that this is everyone's taste, but if it was your taste, then this property is finished, for example, and it is good to go. And despite the fact this is 1.5 million, someone has come along and bought this property. And what I'm seeing is a lot of the properties that, you know the type I'm talking about, someone moved in at 1970 or 1980, they've never decorated the property for 30, 40 years, and now they've got it on Rightmove for £500,000. People aren't buying those anymore. I'm seeing the middle of the market, there's just no interest for your run-of-the-mill property that is in average condition. That's my observation. I'm sure everyone's observation is going to vary slightly, but I'm really seeing your average property that doesn't have any standout feature and is in average condition, unless that price point is absolutely bang on, it is getting zero interest. I'm still seeing some of the fancier properties that are in really good condition selling. I'm seeing some of the nicer properties in the country selling, and I'm seeing some of the cheapest properties selling. But your run-of-the-mill estate property, bang in the middle, that has no standout feature and is average condition, that just grind into a halt. And I think that's where we're going to see some of the biggest falls over the next year or so. And then finally, this is something you can do yourself, and I've talked about this before in a previous videos quite a few months ago, is this can give you a very quick anecdotal view of what is happening in your local market. So you just pop in the area that you want to look at. So I've just popped in Kent for this example. You can put some filters on, so you can put your filters on for the types of properties that you're interested in. So if you don't want to focus on detached properties, just do that. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to take out new homes, because often this can be skewed because if a new home builder's just popped on 10, 15 properties, it messes up this whole experiment. I also take out retirement homes and buying schemes. But like I say, if you're interested in other types of properties, go on to property types and put them in there. And then just scroll down and see what is going on. How many are being reduced? Make sure it's sorted by newly listed first, and then see how many are being reduced versus how many are added. And at the moment, you can see reduced, added, reduced, 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 added, 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 reduced, added, added, reduced, reduced, added, reduced, etc. So I've just gone through the first 2 pages. That's about 50 results. And at least half of those listings were reductions rather than new listings, which I think is just such a strong indicator that sellers are waking up. Sellers are starting to see the new reality. They're starting to panic a bit. Rightmove is a little bit of a bloodbath, but I think it's going to get worse over the next few months, especially as we head into October, November, and December. We might see some small relief in the spring next year, but at the same time, spring next year is when we're going to start to see the data, what is happening at the moment, reported. So even in the spring bounce next year, that scary data from this autumn and this winter could put off a lot of potential buyers and sellers as well. So I don't think 2024 is going to be very, very good for the housing market at all. So those are my observations for Rightmove at the moment. I'll put a pinned link to my Twitter account in the top comment. And if you want to see why I'm confident that house prices are going to continue falling in 2024, I'm going to pop up a video now, and I'll see you guys over there.